welcome to the deep dive. Today we're plunging into some really fascinating material. It asks a pretty fundamental question, actually.
It really does.
What if the reality you perceive, right now,
Yeah.
what if it isn't the true reality? What if it's something else?
Exactly. We're looking at sources that lay out this whole model where our world is like this incredibly sophisticated construction, almost a machine or maybe a simulation.
Right, a machine.
Yeah.
And it's run by someone they call a rebel architect, or the demiurge.
That's the term, yeah, the demiurge. It's like stepping into a whole different operating system for the universe almost.
Okay, so our mission for this deep dive isn't just to, describe this idea, which is pretty wild in itself.
It definitely is.
We want to really unpack the architecture they're proposing for this.
Yeah.
This potential illusion. Try to understand how it might work, according to these sources.
And maybe the most interesting part, look for the suggested glitches. You know, the anomalies, the little cracks that just might, offer glimpses beyond the veil, beyond the simulation's surface.
So yeah, get ready to look at things you thought were familiar, ancient wisdom, natural energies, even why relationships feel so important in maybe a completely different light.
Let's start with a core idea then. This premise that our reality, which feels so solid, so undeniable, might actually be this meticulously built machine.
Yeah, the sources describe it with a sim-esque vibe, right? Not necessarily computer code as we think of it, but a fabricated environment built for sensory experience.
That's it. And crucially, according to these sources, the one who built it, not exactly benevolent.
No.
They call him the architect of lies, the demiurge, depicted as this evil-doing rebel.
Okay.
And the primary goals seem to be control, obscuring some deeper truth, and this is key siphoning energy from the beings living inside this constructed world.
Whoa, siphoning energy. So just by existing in this sim-esque vibe, we might be powering the architect.
That's the implication.
And what we call the material plane, the physical world we touch and see.
Yeah.
That's just the rendered output, the display screen of this vast machine.
That's the framework presented. It's designed to be utterly convincing, And the sources really dive into how this demiurge supposedly maintains such a powerful illusion, how it keeps people from realizing their, inside.
Okay, this is where it gets really intricate.
Yeah.
It's not just that our senses pick up information. These sources suggest our five senses are actually pre-programmed input filters.
Exactly. Think of them like a VR headset that's hardwired. It translates raw cosmic data, but only into the specific environment of the simulation.
So it's actively filtering things out.
Yeah, calibrated specifically to screen out anything that exists outside the simulation's rules. True realities that maybe we would otherwise perceive.
So we're basically hardwired not to see the full picture. That's unsettling.
It is, and it goes deeper than just perception, right? The sources suggest even the fundamental laws of physics, gravity, electromagnetism, thermodynamics.
Yeah, they aren't inherent cosmic rules either.
In this model, no. They're described as the simulation's fundamental programming rules. They provide that predictable rigidity, which makes the world feel stable and real. But that very stability, from this perspective, is designed to mask its artificiality, to suppress any hint of an external reality that, doesn't play by these rules.
Okay, so perception filtered, rules programmed. What about time? We experience it as just relentlessly moving forward.
Time is a linear narrative. That's presented as another program, sequentially constructed. Its purpose, to keep consciousness moving only forward, strictly within the illusion.
Preventing awareness of what, like cyclical patterns?
It's cyclical cosmic rhythms, yeah. Or, perhaps more significantly, any memory or awareness of existence before entering the simulation.
In that pre-simulation state, that's crucial because the biggest tool for control, the sources say, is the veil of forgetfulness.
Yes. This is described as a whole system of consciousness filters. Specifically, there's this amnesia protocol applied at what we call birth.
An amnesia protocol.
Designed specifically to block access to memories of a true higher existence, or maybe states before the simulation. It's the linchpin, really. Because if you don't remember anything else...
You just assume this is all there is.
Exactly. You accept the simulation as the baseline reality.
And just to make double sure we don't even start looking for those memories, the machine keeps us busy with Dire distraction loops.
Right. The constant chase for materialism, status, entertainment, even just the basic survival instincts pushed to the forefront. These aren't just random parts of life in this view.
They're engineered.
Engineered, yeah.
Yeah.
To keep your attention totally tethered within the simulation, prevent introspection, prevent looking outwards, asking bigger questions.
And these distractions, they don't just waste time.
Yeah.
The sources say they actually consume consciousness and energy.
That's the idea. Energy that could otherwise be used for, deeper inquiry or maybe reconnecting with that true reality. And building on that, there's the concept of emotional siphons.
Okay, what's that?
Potentially mechanisms designed to extract specific energetic outputs. Things like fear, anxiety, maybe even worship, or just the simple, raw energy of daily toil.
And this energy, it sustains the simulation or empowers the demiurge.
That's the suggestion. And it prevents that vital life force from contributing to what the sources call true reality.
So everything from our senses to our deepest fears might be in some way serving this machine.
Right.
And within this world, the sources also mention that not everyone or everything is necessarily a true self.
Right. This brings in the idea of non-player characters, NPCs, or they also call them programmed agents.
Okay.
Entities that look sentient, they act sentient, but they lack genuine, independent consciousness. They function more like, sophisticated algorithms.
Like complex background characters in a game. What's their purpose supposed to be?
Multiple things, really. Reinforcing the main narrative, upholding the programmed rules and social norms, maintaining the distractions.
Keeping things ticking along according to the script.
Exactly. And subtly funneling energy. Also acting as gatekeepers, maybe unintentionally, maybe not. But redirecting true consciousnesses away from anomalies, away from questions that could lead to waking up.
Okay, wow. So that's the proposed architecture of this illusion. Filtered senses, programmed physics, programmed time, enforced amnesia, endless distractions, energy siphons, and even automated agents. Sounds pretty comprehensive.
It does sound pretty watertight, doesn't it? But then the sources ask, okay, what exists outside all of this, outside the machine?
Right. And this is where we shift focus to something called key currents, or dragon lines.
Yes. And the crucial point here, stressed in the sources, is that these are not simulated phenomena. They're not part of the demiurge's creation.
They're described as inherent, primordial.
Yeah.
Like the energetic circulatory system of the unsimulated cosmos.
That's a great way to put it. Like the universe's original bloodstream flowing before this machine was ever built on top of it.
So they're the actual power lines, or maybe data streams, of the true creator's reality, fundamental to genuine existence.
Exactly, embodying this dynamic, subtle energy that the demiurge couldn't actually create, only maybe try to hide or distort.
And the sources call them naturally evolved consciousness points. What does that mean?
Isn't that fascinating? It implies that certain locations or specific flows of this key energy are intrinsically linked to the very emergence of consciousness itself.
Places where true cosmic energy and awareness just naturally intersect.
Yes, and these would have been key points the demiurge later needed to obfuscate or build controls around.
And dragon lines are just the bigger versions, the main arteries of this chi network.
Precisely, the major pathways. For anyone who could perceive beyond the simulation's filters, mapping these lines would mean understanding the true network topology of existence.
It would reveal the simulation's boundaries, maybe, its limitations.
Exactly, because the idea is the demiurge had to build on top of this pre-existing chi grid. It couldn't erase it.
So key currents are basically instances of dimensional bleed-through, true energy from outside, sort of, leaking into the simulation.
Yeah, poking through the fabric. But likely filtered or distorted by the simulation's layers.
Right.
It's the underlying reality making itself felt, however faintly. And interestingly, the sources suggest that even within the simulation, there are other energetic phenomena we create. They mention urban currents, things like Wi-Fi, 4G, 5G, power grids.
Okay, those are definitely simulated for function within our world.
Right, but they still generate their own true energetic patterns within the simulation's framework.
Ah, okay, so they have a real energetic signature, even if they're generated by simulated tech.
That's the idea. Distinct from natural chi, obviously, but still perceptible if you're attuned. And noticing that energy, the hum of the simulation's own systems, might actually help you sharpen your senses to detect the much subtler unsimulated chi. It provides a contrast.
That makes sense. Which brings us to this really evocative concept, Antediluvian Geomancy. The sources say this wasn't just like an ancient practice, right?
No, not just something they did. It's described more as a profound state of being, a way of existing before the veil of forgetfulness really clamped down hard.
They describe it as they were geomancy.
Exactly. Operating with minimal interference from that amnesia protocol.
So their understanding of ki, of these energies, it wasn't learned from books or instruments.
It was inherent. Direct sensory perception, intuitive pattern recognition, a kind of pre-rational, holistic way of knowing the world. Something that Demiurge, according to this view, actively suppressed later by pushing linear analytical thought, the kind of thinking that works well within the simulation's rules.
And their actions back then, building megalithic structures, rituals, how they organize societies, these were designed to actively work with the true reality key currents.
Absolutely. The idea is these weren't just symbolic gestures or, primitive superstitions. They were functional. Reality anchors is the term used.
Reality anchors.
Actively strengthening the connection to the true cosmos, and by doing so, subtly making the simulation's own fabric less stable, less all-encompassing. They were consciously aligning their existence with these unsimulated energies.
That's a really powerful thought, building things to essentially weaken the illusion. And a huge part of this ancient understanding you mentioned was related to ultra-subtle magnetism, specifically in relationships.
Yes, and the sources are very clear. This is not described as just a simulated emotion or some psychological phenomenon.
Okay, so what is it then?
It's framed as the energetic manifestation of non-local entanglement. But entanglement between unsimulated consciousnesses are true selves existing outside the simulation's direct control.
So the demiurge can simulate, like, social bonding or feelings, but it can't replicate this fundamental energetic connection between true souls.
That's the core idea. Each true self has a unique resonant signature, like an energetic fingerprint. And when these true selves connect authentically, their frequencies align and they generate this pervasive field of ultra-subtle magnetism, a field that is potentially detectable outside the simulation's framework.
And this magnetism, it's more than just a feeling. It's like a conduit.
Conduit, yes. For direct, unfiltered, non-local information transfer. Gnosis, essentially. Bypassing the demiurge's censorship, bypassing the simulation's filters and distortion.
So strong, authentic relationships in that ancient view weren't just about emotional support or practical survival. They were functional anchors to true reality.
Exactly, making individuals less susceptible to the illusion's pull, less easily manipulated.
Powerful nodes of this subtle magnetism.
Right, and the Antediluvians, the sources suggest, understood how to consciously cultivate this collective magnetism. They called it matrix weaving.
Matrix weaving.
Yeah.
Such a vivid phrase. It sounds like subtly manipulating the perceived reality, creating pockets of true reality, or maybe destabilizing the simulation.
Asserting the physics of the true reality within the simulation's framework. It wasn't magic as we think of it, but the underlying true physics expressing itself. And the sources propose that this inherent power of true relational bonds, this authentic connection, might be a persistent, unquantifiable love glitch.
A glitch. Something the demiurge maybe underestimated.
Right.
Or just couldn't fully suppress.
Perhaps. A fundamental flaw in the system related to the very nature of true consciousness that couldn't be easily patched or programmed out.
Okay, so we have this picture of an ancient era where maybe this knowledge, this connection was more inherent. And then came what the sources call the Great Obfuscation.
Yeah, described as a gradual but deliberate process, deploying stronger filters, basically.
Intensifying those amnesia protocols, for example.
Right.
Suppressing ancestral memory, that innate knowing.
Exactly. Making the key currents and their patterns effectively invisible to average perception, hiding them in plain sight.
And actively masking that ultra-subtle magnetism. So relationships become viewed purely as psychological or social constructs.
Right, diverting our understanding away from their deeper energetic power, their potential function as reality anchors, reducing them to something explainable within the simulation.
And to really cement this, the demiurge fostered what the sources call simulated science and social constructs.
Yes, creating alternative frameworks.
Yeah.
False explanations designed to account for anomalies or true energies, but only within the simulation's own rules.
Like the example of Lee lines you mentioned earlier.
Exactly. It gives a superficial sense of connecting to Earth energies, maybe, but it's a concept carefully constructed, in this view, to avoid linking back to the actual unsimulated chi network. It's a controlled narrative.
Ah, a kind of limited hangout for energetic phenomena,
Yeah.
which explains why later civilizations, born deeper under this veil, perceive these natural energies or the abilities of those antediluvians as magic or supernatural.
Precisely. And that inherent attunement some people might still have felt, it gets reclassified, called belief, or maybe pseudoscience, within the new controlled narrative of the simulated world.
Okay, so how does any of this help us now? Living deep within this potentially obscured reality. Do the sources suggest there are still glitches, still pathways open to the modern seeker?
They absolutely do. This is where they offer potential tools or point to things to look for. One specific thing mentioned is labradorite, the stone.
Labradorite, like the gemstone.
Yeah, it's presented almost as a vital artifact, a kind of natural glitch that the Demiurge's filters perhaps can't fully control or account for.
What's special about it? Is it that shimmery effect, the labradorescence?
That's exactly it. The sources describe that shifting light, that play of color, as being itself a visual anomaly within the simulation. It functions as a kind of filter breaker.
A physical object that literally helps you see through the visual noise.
That's the idea. Labrador is called a resonance amplifier. It supposedly helps defilter the visual static of the simulation, maybe allowing for a faint perception of key currents, or amplifying the subtle echoes of that ultra-subtle magnetism.
So holding it, or working with it, might help recalibrate your senses back towards that older antediluvian way of perceiving.
That's the suggestion. A tool to help you tune into the subtle energies the simulation tries to mask.
That's incredible. A stone that helps you spot flaws in the matrix, basically.
Right.
But glitches aren't just physical objects, are they? The sources talk about internal ones too.
Yes, definitely. There's the echo glitch. This relates to things like memory and intuition.
How so?
They're described as imperfect leaks, leaks from the amnesia protocol.
Little flashes, brief reconnections to the true self or that higher reality.
Exactly, that strong gut feeling you can't explain. Deja vu that feels incredibly significant, those vivid dreams that seem more real than waking life. Or just the deep knowing about something without any logical reason. These are presented as potential memory leaks from your unsimulated self, little bits of true data slipping through the filter.
Interestingly, you said labradorite might enhance receptivity to these.
Yeah, the idea is that by training your eyes and senses to spot the external physical glitches, like the stone's shimmer, you become more attuned and receptive to noticing these internal subtle memory leaks as well. One helps the other.
Okay, that makes sense. And then there's the purpose glitch.
Right. Described as humanity's persistent, maybe even unprogrammable yearning.
For what?
For meaning, for truth, for gnosis direct knowing, that intrinsic drive that the simulation apparently can't fully suppress or satisfy with its distractions.
That feeling that there has to be something more than just the daily grind and entertainment.
Exactly that. It acts like an internal compass, constantly pulling against the distraction loops, seeking deeper meaning, questioning the surface reality that itself is presented as an act of resistance.
Especially if it's amplified by experiences like maybe working with labradorite that offer glimpses suggesting there is something beyond the rendered world.
Precisely. The search for meaning becomes a way of pushing back against the simulation's programming.
So even deep within the system, there's this inherent drive, this unprogrammed desire to understand or break free. And finally, the sources get into sound as another potential pathway, or maybe even a battlefield.
Yeah, sound within the simulation. Tribal music, for instance, is presented very positively as an organic, almost unprogrammed resistance, something coming from true human essence.
Rooted in community, tradition, connection to nature.
Right. Based on vibration, collective consciousness stuff that's inherently difficult for rigid top-down programming to control or even replicate authentically.
So it creates harmonic distortions in the matrix.
That's the idea. It can function as a cultural memory leak, carrying encoded ancestral knowledge or feelings that bypass the amnesia protocol. Its immersive quality can induce altered states, helping you maybe detune from the simulation's default frequency.
And it fosters unity, community, which challenges the isolation the demiurge might prefer.
Exactly. Collective unprogramming almost. Now contrast that with solfeggio frequencies.
Ah, yes, these feel very different. Precise, often digital.
Very. And the sources present a more ambiguous dynamic here. Two possible interpretations are offered.
Okay, what's this first one?
Interpretation 1. They're a kind of managed escape valve created by the demiurge.
A safe release.
Yeah. A passive, controlled form of spiritual experience within the simulation, It feels good, it feels spiritual, but it ultimately reinforces the illusion because it provides an outlet that doesn't actually challenge the core programming. It keeps you safely inside.
Okay, and the second interpretation?
Is that they might be hard-coded bypasses or exploits, like hitting hidden debug commands in the simulation's energetic code.
Causing a recalibration? Or desynchronization from the Matrix's default settings, like a system reset?
Something like it. More direct, maybe a kind of energetic hack, but potentially less holistic, less connected to true organic consciousness than something like communal tribal music. It's an interesting contrast. One potentially a control mechanism, the other potentially an exploit, or just a fundamental output of true human expression.
Okay, so pulling all these threads together, we've got this complex picture. A possible simulated reality run by a controlling demiurge, but countered by the persistent existence of things like ki, ancient wisdom like geomancy, the power of true connection, and these modern glitches, labradorite, intuition, purpose, certain sounds.
What's really fascinating, I think, is that the existence of all these potential glitches, these anomalies, points to one major implication in these sources. The demiurge's control isn't perfect.
The simulation isn't airtight.
Exactly. It suggests that genuine avenues to true understanding, to connection with whatever is outside, do exist, even from within it.
And the path to gnosis, to that deeper knowing, isn't necessarily about some dramatic escape plan, but more about heightened perception, active inquiry, right here.
That seems to be the core message. Learning to look beyond the rendered surface, listening for the unprogrammed rhythms hidden beneath all the noise, and crucially, trusting the echoes of your true self, that inherent wisdom, that intuition that the amnesia protocol tries so hard to suppress.
So reclaiming that connection to unsimulated reality, whatever that means for each person, is presented as the ultimate act of defiance against this architect of lies.
A remembering of the true cosmic song that the simulation constantly tries to drown out with its own static.
It really shifts the focus, doesn't it? From trying to escape from the world to learning how to perceive what's truly here, beyond the rendering, beyond the filters.
Yeah, it's a profound shift in perspective. We've explored a really challenging idea today that our reality might be this deeply layered illusion managed by a demiurge with less than benevolent intentions. But the source material doesn't just leave us there in despair.
No, it definitely suggests hope, or at least possibility. It suggests that even within this complex construction, sparks of true reality persist.
Whether that's in ancient knowledge, like the subtle energy awareness in geomancy, or the actual flow of ki, or that undeniable power you feel in true human connection.
Or even surprising tools, like a simple stone like labradorite, or the resonant frequencies in certain kinds of music.
Yeah. These potential glitches all suggest the simulation isn't perfect. And maybe the key to deeper truth, to gnosis, isn't about leaving the world behind, but about learning to perceive what's already here, just hidden beneath the surface, beyond the rendering.
So here's maybe a thought to leave you with. If you just entertain the possibility, just for a moment, that your senses, your understanding, maybe even your emotional reactions, might be filtered or programmed by some kind of elaborate machine.
How does that fundamentally change how you interact with the world around you? What might you start to notice or sense or even know if you began actively looking for the glitches?